Hello, everyone. This is the Fabric Spotlight, a series of talks with enterprise CXOs, infrastructure executives, cloud infrastructure investors, and entrepreneurs. With our guests, we discuss industry trends and cover cloud, infrastructure, and enterprise topics. Today, I'm delighted to have a chat with Punit Minocha, Executive Vice President of Business and Corporate Development at Zscaler. Hi, Punit. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
Hey, Prabakar, thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure.
Really good, really good. So you have been with Zscaler for several years. It would be good if you could share a little bit about your journey before joining the company and the experiences that have shaped you to what you are now.
My career is perhaps no different than a lot of other folks who come from India. I came here for my engineering degree, picked that up, and very quickly after my master's, ended up at Intel, where I started work on the microprocessors. It was a very good foundational experience for me. I learned a fair amount from folks, not just on the technical side, but then I was exposed to the ODMs, where they were incorporating our chips into their platform. And in that journey, I realized that I wanted to be more on the business side of things, which prompted me to go back to school and get my business degree. Right after Intel, I was, pure coincidence, I ended up in cybersecurity. It was pure chance. I knew some people and ended up in cyber. Certainly wasn't the intent. 20 years later, it was something that I reflect and go, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. In my journey in cybersecurity, my first stop was at a company called Trend Micro. It's a public company traded on the Nikkei Stock Exchange. I was exposed to a mentor of mine, Eva Chen. She's the CEO at Trend, and took me under her wings. I realized I learned a lot on cyber from her, where the threats continue to evolve. And the bad guys are always one step ahead, and so you're always trying to play whack-a-mole and catch up. And as a result, it intrigued me enough that I wanted to continue. I stayed at Trend for about 8 years, various roles: biz dev, M&A, general management, managing large teams of products. And then I had the itch to get back into something smaller, and that's when I ended up at Palo Alto Networks. Started that business development team, was there for about 2.5 years. And another opportunity came knocking, and that was Zscaler, which is where I am today. I've been at Zscaler about 8.5 years, and in a very similar capacity, where I run biz dev, corp dev, M&A. And just for your audience, a little about Zscaler. With applications moving to the cloud and users going mobile, it has really disrupted the overall networking and security industry. The architectures that were previously anchored in the data center are no longer applicable. If anything, COVID has proved that. We're all sitting remotely and working from home. And so this idea of being anchored to a data center just does not hold. And that's where Zscaler has come in. We're a publicly traded company now, serving about 5,000 customers, 25% of the global 2,000. And think of us as the largest security cloud out there, security checkposts that are all over the world. Think of them as scrubbing centers, such that nothing good leaves the organization and nothing bad comes in. Large enterprises, customers of Zscaler would include folks like a GE, a Shell, a Siemens, a Nestle. I could go on with that list, but in general, that's what we are focused on. It's a really big opportunity in front of us, and we're dogmatically focused on it. So that's a little about myself.
A couple of very interesting things there. One is that we share the fact that both our jobs, first jobs out of college was Intel.
It gives a great foundation, as I'm sure.
Intel was just a fantastic platform to build a
Indeed.
career on. That was
Indeed.
awesome. The second thing that you mentioned is the importance of having a mentor, development, Eva Chen. That's very good for the audience to latch on to, I think. So let's kind of like talk about Zscaler a little bit, the business. There's so many players in the security landscape. It is really crowded, right?
Yeah.
But Zscaler has done a fantastic job of, becoming a well-identified, distinguished company. So from your journey perspective, can you share with us how Zscaler managed to build up such a solid story in the crowded market?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few stories that we can draw from that your audience might benefit from. So the founder and CEO, Jay, he's a serial entrepreneur, and prior to founding Zscaler, he had done a few startups and had shall I say, become financially independent. And so when he decided to start Zscaler, it was a pretty audacious vision. And why that is important is, for any of your audience, entrepreneurs and the like, it's important to understand what are you trying to build or you're undertaking. Sure, everyone wants to build something big and bold, but it requires a lot of time, perseverance, investment, right? In the case of Jay, he didn't take any external funding at the time, and so he self-funded it. Why that is important is, in a lot of instances when you have external funding, there's time pressure to show some results on the opposite side. And as a result of that, you do end up now and then taking some shortcuts from a product or from an architectural standpoint. Jay had a lot of patience. He, like I said, he self-funded the first part of the company's journey, and it allowed us to make some very fundamental decisions from a product architecture standpoint that have now, really allowed us to build a distinct competitive advantage. But if you actually step back and you think about what makes us different, I've seen some of the slides. I wasn't there at the time. I joined a couple of years later from the time the company was founded. But the slides that detailed out the problem statement, 11, 12 years ago, are still the same. The idea was, mobile devices are just going to be prevalent all over, and users will get so tethered to these mobile devices. That's how they will want to consume, the internet and their traffic patterns. That was one of the biggest, macro trends that we try to latch onto. The second was applications over time would move to cloud. Jay had seen what Salesforce.com had done to Siebel and PeopleSoft, etc. And so he had this vision that I want to be the Salesforce.com of security, right? And you peel the onion and you look at some of those macro trends, they're just as pervasive today, right? But when we sought out to build out the Zscaler, those were the two fundamental problem statements. Users going mobile, applications going to the cloud, need to rethink what you do about security. And so, for your audience, I would say, you have to have the awareness to try and understand, am I trying to go after something so big, so substantial, it will require a lot of time and investment. And that's one approach. The other approach, and we see it a lot in the market today, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think it is just as applicable, is are there enough pockets of opportunity where you're trying to solve a problem statement that may not be as big, but it still exists, right? So you have to have that understanding of where it fits. And, Zscaler was, of course, in the latter scenario.
Yes, obviously, Jay having been successful in 2 or 3 companies before, it gave him a foundation.
Exactly.
So that's really good to know. So the now, when we connected, you were talking about how Zscaler is, planning to innovate and expand and all of that. So maybe you can cover a little bit of that. What are the key areas that Zscaler is looking to expand and innovate? Is there kind of like a overarching thesis? Just like you mentioned, there was this overarching thesis of Salesforce.com of security, right? Is there an overarching theme that you are going after in your expansion now?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. So let me step back for a minute and first talk about how we think of innovation at Zscaler, and then I'll get into these specific areas. From an innovation standpoint, obviously we think we have some of the best engineers in the cybersecurity marketplace, and so we obviously foster a fair amount of innovation just within the company, whether it's existing products continue to enhance, but then also we create this opportunity for our engineers where we create new businesses or new areas to go off and go build. And so we've done that successfully in the past. So, one of the original products that we had built was something called Zscaler Internet Exchange, Internet Access. And it was for users going out to the public internet. Could be CNN, CNBC, etc. You pick your destination of choice. When the end user goes out to the internet, they were using 150, 200 of the Zscaler data centers, which act as scrubbing centers, going out to the internet, making sure that nothing good leaves the organization, nothing bad comes back in, right? So if you look at employees of a Nestle or a GE, etc., how this manifested itself for it was, they were going out directly to the internet. The actual user experience was far superior. And so you're not only getting security, but better user experience, right? And so our employees got very charged up. And that has manifested itself in, taking a look at other parts of security that are ripe for disruption. So we make that foundational piece open to our employees to go off in different areas and innovate within Zscaler. In addition to that, we are now at a point where we look to augment that organic innovation by, not only making acquisitions, but also investments. We are very mindful of the fact that we have only a view of the market, but there's a lot of other very smart people out in the industry, and so we want to keep learning. And our goal from an investment standpoint, acquisition standpoint, is to make sure that we are, bringing in some of the smartest minds into the Zscaler family. So that's sort of how we look at innovation as a whole. From areas, I would say, hey, we believe we have built a true platform. And I know the word platform gets used rather loosely. But if I was to step back for a minute, the vision today of Zscaler has evolved. We position ourselves as something called a zero trust exchange. Think of it almost like a switchboard. And the analogy I might give is, back in the day, I'm sure we can all relate to this. If you wanted to call someone, you had to call into a switchboard, they made the connection, and so on and so forth. That's perhaps the most secure way of doing things. It's not very secure, very user-friendly, but it's very secure, right? And so think of us as a way of actually providing that in real time, such that your user experience is not affected, but still you're being very secure. So that zero trust exchange, whether it's a user connecting to an application, whether that application is on the internet, whether the application is in your private data center, whether it's an application connecting to another application, that fundamental platform is how we position ourselves today. And so when you step back and you think about things that interest us, it's any and all of the usual things. We are the largest security cloud today, processing well over 150 billion transactions on a daily basis. And that manifests with a lot of data. And, with this data, we are able to find some very interesting nuggets, threat actors. We just saw recently the SolarWinds attack. That lends itself to doing a lot of machine learning, AI, on this data, training and trying to get in front of the bad actors. And so ML AI is an area of a fair amount of interest. Our customers keep telling us, we are moving more and more of our workloads, our footprint to the cloud. And so this new area of cloud DevSecOps is emerging. That's an area of interest, and we continue to look at that. I would say, fundamentally, things that we are already doing today, we want to continue to add. Maybe there's some product feature gaps that we have that our product teams identify. Mm-hmm. It may be faster to bring in people as opposed to going and building it yourself. So that becomes areas of expansion. I think it's the usual across the board. Companies reach a certain maturation where you look at the traditional build versus buy trade-off. And more often than not, we do that quite effectively here at Zscaler, and then obviously continue to augment our overall product portfolio.
Yeah, zero trust exchange, that's a very interesting term. So we'll come back to that in a second.
Sure.
But as a way of setting the stage for that, what we see is that there are, there's a broad adoption into the cloud. There's no question about it. But there seems to be still some people who are holding back. Some large companies actually. So what is Zscaler's proposition to them to saying, no, you can be safe, you should adopt the cloud? Is that the message that you go, and how do you articulate that?
Absolutely. I would say your statements are, very astute, and perhaps a little more applicable, 18, 24 months ago. Where there was this general sense that cloud is not for me. It's I have my way of approaching it. One of the biggest catalysts for some of the largest enterprises, and I'm talking about the financials now. I can name drop the logos, but almost all of them were in the past reticent about security and cloud. Those were usually two words that didn't go together. Almost all of them unequivocally now are starting to actively lean in on cloud security. What has fundamentally changed in the last 12 months is COVID. And not as much about, I need to find better ways to get my users onto the network and allow them to collaborate, but it's more the realization, the two macro trends that I started with at the beginning, the users going mobile and the applications moving to the cloud, and we need to rethink the network, we need to rethink security. That fundamental appreciation got triggered over COVID, where they fundamentally started to realize, yes, it's time we need to step back and think about this, right? As opposed to we'll get to it later, right? I mean, we joke here, I saw it on LinkedIn, one that Zscaler is able to associate with very, very personally is, what was the biggest catalyst of transformation for you? And usually they'll have a CTO, or who was it? CTO, CIO, CISO, and the last option is COVID. And so I think you get the point, and it's across the board. It's not necessarily limited to just Zscaler. I mean, if you heard Andy Jassy, the CEO of AWS at the keynote last fall at reInvent, he talked about the idea that COVID has been the biggest catalyst for the CXOs now to say, we need to rethink how we approach IT as a whole.
Makes sense.
And obviously, because of that, security is a key component of that. And so to me, I think, the largest of large financials now are starting to lean in because they're appreciating, that they need to find a better way to adapt to these macro trends. Now, I think what is important to keep in mind is just because, they are wanting to lean in does not imply that they want to make any compromises or take any shortcuts, right? And so as a company, we have to make sure that the platform we provide still has the full capabilities that they are used to with their traditional on-premise environment, still has the compliance requirements that they're used to. I mean, we'll come across any and all types of examples, large customer, financial customer in Germany, right? Very protective about security and compliance, wants to make sure that, GDPR is checked, wants to make sure that any and all of their security from a transactional standpoint is happening only in Germany. You could make, we have to, as a company, adhere to those types of requirements. So my point is, as vendors, we shouldn't expect our customers to have to make shortcuts or to make compromises, if you will, right? It's our job to make sure that they don't do that, and yet they feel comfortable embracing this.
Great. So that's a good perceptive comment there. It's very interesting how you are working with the cloud vendors to do these things. That's very interesting. So let's kind of like work on maybe demystifying some of the phrases that the industry throws around. For instance, you mentioned zero trust and zero trust exchange, and you also mentioned users going mobile and remote and home, and it's clearly relevant to that. And you also announced a partnership with CrowdStrike, which also appears to be closely related to that. So can you kind of like explain the zero trust exchange, the user mobility, and what zero trust actually means, and how CrowdStrike plays into that?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I mean, it almost feels like everyone is jumping onto that zero trust. Yes. Hey, I'm zero trust, etc. It's funny, I rewind back. I remember this fondly. About 4 or 5 years ago, we had started to talk about zero trust. We spent a considerable amount of time with some of the analysts like a Gartner and a Forrester. And it's actually very gratifying to see, some of that work has gotten to a point where everyone says I'm zero trust. But, to answer your question more directly, the way you want to actually think about zero trust is actually what it says: trust no one. And so the idea, when I used the analogy of the switchboard, let me give you another analogy. I mean, you walk into, let's say, the Fabric office. Me as a guest, I walk in and I'm here to see you. There's, the traditional way would be you come and greet me, right? It's an escort me to your office, or someone from reception tries to escort me. But you certainly don't want to give me, a access to a badge and say, you can walk around anywhere in the office and hopefully you'll find Prabakar, right? That's what I would say has happened in the past, that type of approach. What I mean by that is, to the extent that you and your audience is familiar with a VPN. Mm-hmm. Okay? No one in their right mind actually likes a VPN because it really slows down the user experience. But what does a VPN do? Fundamentally, it takes you and puts you inside a corporate network, okay? So imagine me as a visitor in the Fabric office. I came inside the Fabric network, and guess what? I can do whatever I want, because once I'm inside that VPN, I can go see you, I can go see any of your colleagues, and no one can stop me, right? But that's what a VPN does. And so fundamentally, this idea of zero trust manifests in that, a user should be allowed access to just a particular application or workload. As in, me coming to see Prabakar, I should be only allowed to go and see Prabakar, right? Everything else, the other key tenet of Zero Trust is everything else should be invisible. I shouldn't be able to see any of your other colleagues, right? And that's a very key important tenet, right? I mean, if you look at some of these breaches that have occurred in the past, a more recent one, JP Morgan was, an HVAC contractor got access to VPN credentials, right? And was able to get in, an HVAC contractor, right? And was then able to get into some personal financial information, right? An HVAC contractor shouldn't have access to personal financial confidential information, right? They should, if anything, have access only to HVAC systems, right? But the reason I'm giving that example is because of that lateral movement, right? And so there's a few fundamental tenets of Zero Trust. One is give just one simple access, a user to an application, not to anything else. Everything else should be invisible. And then the last piece that we talk about and sometimes gets lost is a proxy-based architecture. And it's a little more technical, but I'll, if you might just give me a couple of minutes, I'll give you yet another example. Within the security world, there's two types of security architectures that folks have adopted. One is, I'm going to try and stream scan. I'm going to look at traffic as it's coming and try and make a good calculated decision. Most firewalls fall in that category. Then there's something called a proxy. A proxy, is you sort of come, the traffic comes. I'm actually going to stop the traffic. I'm going to look at it, and then I'll send it along. The best analogy I might give you is, imagine you are, again, traveling through a checkpost. You're flying and you're at the airport, right? One example of security is going to be, I have my luggage. It's going through a scanner, all right, and it's scanning for stuff. Great, it does a pretty good job, all right. A more secure way, it would be intrusive, but a more secure way might be, I'm going to take that luggage, I'm going to open it up, I'm going to look at it to be sure it's completely safe, and then I'll send it along. That's what a proxy does. Now, usually a proxy is extremely slow. It introduces a lot of latency, and it breaks applications. That's where the disruption came from Zscaler, right? Where we say, yeah, you're right, but then the trick is to be able to do that type of security at scale, at performance, such that you are able to do any and all of that. So Zero Trust manifests itself in any and all of that, being able to provide the utmost amount of security, using a proxy-based architecture, but then also users to applications, and then keeping everything else invisible. Those are some of the fundamental tenets. Now, specific to CrowdStrike, I mean, it's a partnership that we value immensely. We leverage CrowdStrike. We think of Zscaler as a leader in cloud security, more in the traditional network and cloud, whereas CrowdStrike has, earned their claim to fame more coming from the endpoint, right? And so if security tends to be a very fragmented industry, and we want to work with any and all partners to serve our customers. And so we view CrowdStrike very much like like Zscaler, born in the cloud, addressing endpoint. And we will not claim to be the be-all, end-all solution for security for our customers. So we leverage CrowdStrike. They have a presence on the endpoint. They know if certain pieces of security are running on your laptop or your mobile device. They can tell us, Prabakar today is running certain pieces of operating systems, certain security software for additional protection, and as a result, he is less risky. As an example, maybe I'm not running my security software, and so I might be slightly higher risk, right? And so we can take those attributes, and as part of the partnership, we are able to consume those. We are then also able to give CrowdStrike some attributes that they can then consume. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Security is, there's so many nuances of security, and I tell, folks, our customers included, they should ask for, solutions that work well together. It's not just, this is my solution and this is the be all end all. It's got to be such that you work with other players in the market to address your customer needs. And so, CrowdStrike and Zscaler is a perfect combination to help address our customers' zero trust needs.
That's kind of like this CrowdStrike Zscaler thing is a perfect setup for kind of like the next topic. Yet another buzzword that's being thrown around is SASE, Secure Service and Secure Access Service Edge, the Gartner created category. So there, the question is, how do you see it evolving? Is it going to be like one company providing the entire SASE suite, or do you see some kind of a collaboration taking place and the customers getting integrated, but solutions made up of components from different vendors? How do you see that evolving?
Yeah, good question. And so let me just again step back and frame the term SASE for your audience. SASE stands for Secure Access Service Edge. And I'll go back to the two big macro trends: users going mobile, applications moving to the cloud. What existed in the past, in these large enterprises was what we call the traditional hub and spoke network. You had a big headquarters, you had branches, they were all connected using private MPLS circuits. And, that's traditionally what has been the network topology. You fast forward to today's day and age where everyone is trying to get on the internet as quickly as possible. This, hub and spoke network of going back to headquarters does not make a lot of sense. It slows down the user experience. You want to get out from the branch office or wherever you are directly onto the internet. Usually, one of the reasons why you don't do that is for security reasons, right? And so because of these macro trends, there's been a big change or transformation that has been going on in what we call the traditional branch network. Mm-hmm. And so what may have existed in the past was a branch router. It could have been a traditional Cisco ISR or Juniper router that has now started to evolve into something called SD-WAN. In fact, a portfolio company of yours, VeloCloud, Sanjay and Ajit, we're very close friends of theirs, SD-WAN and security. Right. And so that branch router is now moving to a point where we are not only providing secure networking that an SD-WAN is providing, and being able to do so in a very efficient manner, cost efficient, software adapt to business needs, and then security, all within the branch. Now, one of the fundamental tenets of SASE is that the security should be rather comprehensive and is delivered from the cloud. So it is not something that is sitting on-prem, but rather in the cloud, because security continues to evolve, continues to change. And if you have to keep that on-prem, it's really going to increase the form factor of that device because security is so compute intensive. But then more importantly, now you're having to update the devices often. So best done where the networking piece is a combination of cloud and some on the actual device, and then coupled with cloud security. So we absolutely love the SASE trend. We believe it's one that the market is finally adopting and embracing this idea of cloud security, cloud delivered security. In general, our view of that is that there's companies that do a really good job on the networking side, on the SD-WAN side, secure access, and then this secure access being provided by the cloud security, and then the edge itself is the SD-WAN device. Now, there's certain vendors out there in the market that claim we will do it all together. Mm-hmm. Each one is entitled to their own opinion. I let customers decide what they want. I'm also of the firm belief it's important, as a company to know what you do well and what you perhaps don't do well. And having the appreciation and awareness, is just as important. And so we, think of Zscaler doing a lot of cloud security. We want to work with the who's who on the networking side, and the partnerships that we have are a testament to that.
So very enlightened point of view, I should say. Obviously, having participated in Velo Cloud, that's
right.
gratifying to hear. So you mentioned applications to the cloud and end users mobility. So a couple of things that pertain to both, which is more kind of like in the cutting edge, bleeding edge, is the edge cloud and 5G. So where are you going with those?
Yeah, good question. Obviously, there's a lot of noise, and rightly so, in terms of the potential opportunity with 5G. If you step back and you think of what 5G is doing, with the high bandwidth that 5G can provide, you now have this possibility of a mobile edge compute, MEC, where you can put some of these applications as close to end users as you possibly can. And so certainly today, I think the way we look at this opportunity is we are investing pretty extensively in it. We think it is a natural extension of what we do already, right? And as these form factors become available, we want to make sure that we take full advantage of it.
Great. We have covered a lot of ground. So I think maybe it's time to kind of pull back and go back to your own experience. You have had a lot of experience of being in big companies, startups, and going back and forth. So what's your kind of like advice to our entrepreneurial audience in terms of do's and don'ts, how to work with Zscaler, any of those kinds of things?
Yeah, good question. And, I won't necessarily limit it just to Zscaler. I think I touched on a few of these things, and it really, there is no black and white here. There's less of a science and there's quite a bit of an art to it, in that, you have to have the awareness, you have to have the appreciation for what you are trying to build. And then just as well, have the awareness to say, I'm going to focus on this and not that. The this and not that, I think, occurs perhaps later on in the overall maturation, because by then you have formed some nucleus to go build your company on, as an entrepreneur. The opposite is perhaps more applicable when you're starting, because what you're now trying to do is validate your overall thesis, and then whatever you're trying to do, is adjust and fail fast. What you don't want to do is get so married to an idea. I'm sure, Prabakar, you come in touch with a few people, who say, this is an idea and I'm just sticking to it, right? So you want to make sure that you have the appetite to adapt, is the other piece. And then again, I think it is particularly important to get validation from customers. The validation from customers, you actually have to peel the onion. You can't just walk in and say, Mr. Customer, I'm building this, will you buy it? That's not the right way to go about it, right? What you want to try and understand is, what are some of the pain points they're facing? You're not asking for, should I go build a solution that they already can associate with? The real opportunity lies in trying to find a solution that does not exist today. Right, but for them to articulate that pain point, such that you can associate it. If I create a solution, that's the value prop that will appeal to the customer, right? So there's a little discovery, there's an art and some science to it. Early on, you want to adapt, you want to be malleable. Once you have a nucleus, then you want to get a little more discipline on, staying focused. I think it's a combination of any and all of the above.
Great. Those are some really good tips for the entrepreneurial audience here. So thank you, Punit, for the insightful talk. It's been a pleasure.
Well, likewise, and Prabakar, I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to doing more business with you guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for watching. We'll be back with another Spotlight episode soon. Bye.